Joyce Messier. I represent the board of Wild Pines, the owners of the harbour. You must be from the RCM. Leyton, my maiden name. I'm glad to see you here. None taken, officer. Either way, I'm glad you're both here now. I was dispatched to handle a strike, not a lynching. Anything I can do to assist the RCM in this matter, I will. Gladly. Of course, Detective. Take care. You're back. Good. What can I help you with? Not an umbrella, I hope. I don't need one myself, you see. Joyce Messier. I represent the board of Wild Pines, the owners of the harbour. You gentlemen must be from the RCM. Nothing, honestly. I've said it to every drunk in town, and you're the first one who's responded. Why, yes, I am. Good afternoon, officer. I'm Joyce. I meant you. The Rejoyce Citizens Militia. The police. The information I'm to share with you includes sensitive trade secrets. For the sake of my employer, I have to ask for your name and badge number. The information I'm to share with you includes sensitive trade secrets. For the sake of my employer, I have to ask for your names and badge numbers. How curious. Why is that, Detective? More curious by the minute. Why is that, Detective? Oh. And what happened to yours, Detective? You mean someone stole your badge? Of course there are. We're on an archipelago. How else are you supposed to get around? We are. And the city of Rejoyce is on the island of Leyton. Okay, if you want to get technical. The point is, we're all on islands here, and sail is still the most expedient way to get from one island to another, especially when you're in a hurry to resolve a strike. I haven't seen anyone else drive a souped-up Capri Kenema motor carriage either. Neither is this. A toy, I mean. It's a machine for crossing long distances in the Bay of Rejoyce, between the city and the islands. Neither is that. A toy, I mean. It's a machine for crossing long distances in the Bay of Rejoyce, between the city and the islands, no matter whose it is. A motor carriage is just a tool. You need it to do your job, as I do mine. It's just a means of getting where you need to go. Pardon me, it's not especially relevant. I suppose that one does have a rather loud electrical engine. A specific drone in any case. In any case, what a surprise. That is one disadvantage of a motor carriage relative to a sloop like this one. Of course, the situation is precarious. Good. I mean, we are on Leyton, are we not? Yes, we are. We are on Leyton. Officer, I assure you I'm a highly qualified pleasure craft operator. I just renewed its safety inspection last month, officers. It is completely seaworthy. In fact, it's taken part in not one, but two insulindic regattas. Even finished once. I just renewed its safety inspection last month, officer. It is completely seaworthy. In fact, it's taken part in not one, but two insulindic regattas, and finished once. The other time, I would have finished the race were it not for an urgent work matter, much like the one I'm on now. Why wouldn't it be? This is Rejoyce, Wayfarer Act and all. Anyone can drive a boat. The boat? No. It is called Corps de Leyte 19, because that's the type of sloop it is. Of course, of course. Any more questions about the boat, sir? My husband is. I have dual citizenship. A Vespertine is handier when travelling. Why Dolores? Well, it means nothing to me. I think I'll stick with the factory name. But thank you for the suggestion. My sloop? I like it a lot. It's the eel's hips, baby. Technically speaking, you don't. Surely you're aware that under the Wayfarer Act, the RCM doesn't have the authority to demand anyone's operator license. Freedom of movement and all that. Then certainly you must know that under the Wayfarer Act, the RCM doesn't have the authority to demand anyone's operator license. Freedom of movement and all that. You may still ask for my passport. You may still ask to see my passport. That I'm obliged to share with you. Oh my, the E word. You mean to say that it's a symbol of conspicuous consumption? That I'm a member of the ruling class? Think nothing of it, officer. What's a little class conflict between friends? Yes. Anyway, you mean eel's hips. But point taken. I am a bourgeois woman, and this is my fast, light, interminably bourgeois boat. It is anti-centennial. Okay, it is anti-centennial. I assure you they drove quite the hard bargain for this space. But you're right. I am a bourgeois woman, and this is my long, incredibly lightweight, interminably bourgeois boat. I assure you they drove quite a hard bargain for this space. But you're right. I am a bourgeois woman, and this is my fast, lightweight, interminably bourgeois boat. Okay, my. It's as if there's a tiny spinner on the side of his head and he's reeling thoughts out. Of course, as they do. I can see your hand is getting tired now. There is no need to continue. No one is keeping score. No worries. We can just go back to discussing my fast, large, interminably middle-class boat. Your marbles on glass, dear. Don't worry. Oh, no. It was quite a while ago, but I think... Yes, we were discussing my fast, large, ineluctably middle-class boat. Lieutenant, I truly don't understand what is happening here. Officer, I am so sorry for the whole pier situation. Of course. You have my full cooperation and the cooperation of the Wild Pines Group. Of course. You have my full cooperation and the cooperation of the Wild Pines Group. Officer, I don't mean to be rude, but are you sure your recent medical episode wasn't a stroke? You stood there for the longest time, and it looked like you were having trouble forming a sentence. Oh dear, that is serious. If this is in any way dangerous for your health, we can always resume our conversation later. My mother had a stroke. She exhibited similar problems, although not quite like yours. Of course. Please accept my apologies. What can I help you with? If you have doubts about your brain's blood supply, well, that's what we call a serious matter. A stroke could partially explain the memory trouble you've been experiencing. You have my full cooperation. Drinking less sounds like a great start. Go on, you have my full cooperation. Such a tough guy. You have my full cooperation, tough guy, and that of the Wild Pines Group. Everything. Right up to, but not including, trade secrets. First, you'd have to repeal the Emergencies Act of Trade in Aliments that gives me the right to silence. It's quite the octopus. Why? By throwing off half a century of foreign domination under the Coalition. Unfortunately for you, the Coalition also leases you the right to police West Revershol. Good luck is only kept in place by the vested interests of half the civilized world, including your own. I hope I can be of help. Heavens, no. There have been 2 prior strikes. Both times the union won significant concessions, including overtime pay and a medical plan. This time their demands are more, I guess you could say, aggressive. I wasn't the original negotiator here. I took over after Mr. Gaumont hit a wall with Mr. Clare, the union boss. Mr. Clare refused to speak with Gaumont despite concessions he'd granted the union in prior negotiations. Let's say I was not making the kind of progress I'd hoped for when I first arrived. Charmed. Enchanted. Put under his spell. I believe the official title is Senior Labour Negotiator. In practice, I'm a grocery clerk. I relay the union's demands to Wild Pines and return with Wild Pines' counteroffer. Yes, Jean-Luc Measurehead. They're nonsense. A load of tripe. But we were on the subject of the talks, I believe. Oh, so you've met him. Has he beguiled you with his inane theories? What can I say? The union employs a giant covered in tattoos. A racist giant. I guess that's part of their big tent organization now. I arrived 3 weeks ago. Yes, in the middle of February. The bay was still partially frozen then. I prefer to do these things on site, like the RCM. Funny, I could think of a few ways to dispute them. But we digress. They're not. That's the problem. The union stopped all negotiations a week ago, after that awful lynching took place. Of course. To each their own. I am glad you see it that way. To repeal the act would mean repealing the coalition government, the one that leases you the right to police West Revershol. I'm afraid the Emergencies Act was put in place by the same coalition government that leases the RCM the right to police East Revershol. But I am derailing us. You wanted to know about the strike. I imagine a man like you can take quite the lashing. But I believe we were talking about the strike. Of course. How else can I help? There are leaflets everywhere, and banners. What did they say again? Oh yes, then you might also like their other slogan. Demand democracy. Fortunately, they explained it. Every time the Wild Pines Group makes a decision about anything, it needs the signature of each of the 2,200 workers in its Martinez terminal. In its defense, another said, demand democracy. Pretty tame stuff compared to every worker a member of the board. Personally, I agree. It lacks the pizzazzo of every worker a member of the board. It's quite simple, you see. Every time the Wild Pines Group makes a decision about what? About anything, really. It needs the signature of each of the 2,200 workers in its Martinez terminal. Just so you understand, this is but one of 22 terminals owned by Wild Pines. Essentially, not only are they kings of the company, they are also kings of the 72,000 employees of Wild Pines Group. Personally, I don't think it has the same pizzazzo as every worker a member of the board, so I hoped. But this type of opening is usually followed by a more reasonable offer. I've yet to hear one. Just the same nonsensical slogan repeated over and over again. I'm not sure. Naturally, I assume that was just their opening position, a hard-nosed tactic with a side of mockery. But there's been no follow-up, just the same nonsensical slogan repeated over and over again. That may well be. It's not up to me to decide who is king, but as negotiations go, it's not a swell start. They're having a blast. But how can they afford it? After 4 months, my assumption was they would prefer a more practical solution. What we do. I'm afraid I don't speak for Wild Pines as a whole. It's a giant undertaking. The Pines' core competency is logistics. Container shipping, freight, that sort of thing. See those airships there, blinking? Those are the shipping side of things. I first heard it from the bowyer at the gates, the one whose very name advertises his aversion to work. I think he said it was Call Me Mañana, and that is the terminal. Another subdivision deals with energy, oil and gas exploration. Offshore platforms. They started as an exploration and cargo fleet conducting trade between the Samaran and Insulindian Isolas 250 years ago, when pine ships explored the South Seminese and charted Lomantang on behalf of the suzerain. Why, thank you. I'm not at liberty to discuss the company balance sheet, but I can tell you that last year, the company booked more than 20 billion real in revenue. It's a number, officer. A big one. It's made of 1,000 millions. A million is made of 1,000 thousands. And to think, there are years when the group runs a loss of billions. And to think, there are years when the group books losses in the billions. 22 billion is a large number. But consider this. The conglomerate employs 72,000 people. They all need wages. 20 billion is a large number, but the conglomerate employs 72,000 people. They all need to be paid. Then there are capital improvements, interest payments, centuries of care, deliberation and madness have gone into this endeavour. Vessels pass through the great unrest to re-emerge with apricots in tow. The logic of the system is totalising. It's taken everything from its employees to build it. I was not trying to impress you, I swear. The conglomerate employs 72,000 people. Wages cover most of the revenue. Yes, past a certain point, numbers begin to seem imaginary, but they are quite real for the 72,000 employees who depend on Wild Pines for their paychecks. There are no minor cogs in the system. Each terminal must be accounted for, lest the entire system break. Every hiccup in such a system means thousands lose their jobs, the world over. I'm here to assure that doesn't happen. A conglomerate the size of Wild Pines is like a shark. If it stops moving and growing, it will die. Then what becomes of those 72,000 families? It is a tremendous responsibility. A conglomerate the size of the Wild Pines is like a shark. If it stops moving, it will die. Then what becomes of those 72,000 families? It's a tremendous responsibility. Wild Pines employs 72,000 people, all of whom have families that depend on their salaries. It is a tremendous responsibility. We built this district, all the best parts of it. Rue de Saint-Ghislain, with its bastions, the plazas Meteor and Mosaic, even some of the old street lamps have been put back thanks to the investments from the WP. You know more than you let on. Certainly it helped, but most of the original Indo tribes have failed, or been absorbed. To survive, Wild Pines had to grow and adapt. No suzerain did that. You mean aside from being the terminal's legal owners? Who are responsible for moving 8% of the world's cargo? Before Martinez was swallowed by the industrial harbour, even before it was part of Rejoyce, long before Terminal B was erected here, the Pines built it as a resort for its Rejoycean employees. A company getaway? For a weekend or a summer holiday? Then came the revolution. But that's another matter. I'm here to make sure the Pines can fulfill their responsibilities to the place they built. Of course not. Everard is fantastically corrupt. I imagine he has a thick, viscous goo where you and I have blood. He is the most corrupt individual I have ever seen, and I deal with men like him for a living. If there is anyone more venal, more irredeemably nepotistic, then it's his twin brother, Edgar. Yes, Edgar looks exactly like his brother, except for that lazy eye. He also talks exactly like Everard does, and when one's term as foreman is up, the other takes over. It's how they circumvent the term limits, you see, with a funny little switcheroo. While in office, they've embezzled God knows how much of their workers' dues. Oh, heavens, no! We get along just fine. Yet, now that you mention it, I can't stop imagining that black treacle just dribbling down his double chin. The Débardeurs Union was once a perfectly normal institution. 20 years ago, anyway. It must not have been easy to establish under the Emergency Act, but they did it. I can respect that. Have you seen him? Of course. Edgar looks exactly like his brother, except for that lazy eye. He also talks exactly like Everard does, and when one's term as foreman is up, the other takes over. Organised labour at its best, as they say. Then something happened in the local chapter elections. The brothers Clare came and transformed it into a, how do you say, refreshingly honest officer. The company has tried appeasing in the past, but I'm afraid our concessions have only emboldened Everard and his brother. Why do you think so? Thank you for being candid. Sadly, Wild Pines have cooperated with what amounts to a crime syndicate for 2 decades. However much you feed the wolf always hungers. Of course, officer, indeed. And a hungry one. Sadly, Wild Pines have cooperated with what amounts to a crime syndicate for 2 decades. However much you feed the leech always hungers. Or a mob. Sadly, Wild Pines have cooperated with what amounts to a crime syndicate for 2 decades. However much you feed the wolf always hungers. Well, I suppose that's one way to look at it. They're an interesting composition, albeit vile. But enough about Everard. What else can I do for you? I suppose you are, officer. All Revachol. But enough about Everard. What else can I tell you about? Point taken. But enough about Everard. What else can I do for you? Point taken. But enough about Everard. What else can I do for you? Ha! A real man of the left. What else can I tell you about? Quite a few things, I'm afraid. I just can't go around telling confidential information to strangers. I've signed a contract, of course. But before we do, officers, let me be perfectly clear, of course. But before we do, officer, let me be perfectly clear. A pleasure to meet you, Harry. What happened to your badge? The situation is extremely volatile. The sooner we can speak about this lynching business, the better for all of us. What happened to it, Detective? Pleased to meet you, Lieutenant. It is a relief to see a W freighter here. The situation is precarious, to say the least. It needs a quick solution, or we will have a bloodbath on our hands. How can I forget? I was hoping your condition was rhetorical, Detective. A questioning technique. You mean someone stole your badge? I don't, in fact. I'm afraid what I need to tell you is wholly unrelated to art. I really need to discuss it, however, with the RCM, and I need your badge for that. Some arlecchinos, you say? I'm afraid what I need to tell you is anything but fun. I really need to discuss it, however, with the RCM, and I need your badge for that. I see. So, are you saying you lost your badge during the course of this episode? Oh dear. Some kind of encephalopathic amnesia? I don't even know how to respond. Oh dear. I suppose this does explain some of the more curious turns in our conversation. I do believe you, naive as that may sound. I simply can't imagine what you gain by faking such a condition. I have sympathy for your highly unusual conditions, sir, and I believe you, but as it stands, I cannot share any confidential information until I've seen both your badges. I have sympathy for your Highly unusual conundrum, sir. And I believe you. But as it stands, I cannot share any confidential information until I've seen a badge. I'm afraid not, Lieutenant. These are my employer's orders. However, this isn't about my feelings. There's also protocol to consider. I'm afraid I can't say any more until I've seen that badge. I'm afraid I can't say any more until we've taken care of formal protocol. Officer, trust me, officer, I am fully committed to resolving this impasse. This isn't some side gig for me. I will be frank with you. If I'm going to break protocol, I need to be able to justify it to my superiors. They're going to want to see something very tangible. Reports from inside Terminal B suggest it's a hub for the local drug trade. This is an open secret in Martinez. The Union controls the terminal, so it goes to reason. Or you can recover your badge. Though if I may be blunt with you, it sounds like that may be a lost cause. It's quite straightforward. Someone is using Terminal B to smuggle raw ingredients from the Samaran Isola into Revachol with the Union's blessing. Wild Pines has suspected it for years. Yes, I believe there is a connection. But that's a subject for later. Meth and dextroamphetamine, GBL and various synthetic psychedelics. Honestly, it might be quicker to say what you can't make from the stuff. Yes, but you won't get anything out of Evrat and the Dockworkers Union. Still, every chain has its weak link, the lorries. Someone needs to move the ingredients from the harbour into the city. Once they reach Jamrock, they're distributed to a network of local manufacturers, well beyond our grasp. But in transit, they are vulnerable. Precisely. Someone needs to move the ingredients from the harbour into the city. Once they reach Jamrock, they're distributed to a network of local manufacturers well beyond our grasp. But in transit, they are vulnerable. I'll be explicit. If you find this driver, I will share company secrets with you. We did. On more than one occasion. Apparently, there's some sort of inter-precinct disagreement about whose jurisdiction this area falls under. Well, here's your chance, officers. No. We asked East Motor Track to raise the drawbridge. The road company is a partner of one of our subsidiaries. However, this is a limited time opportunity. Once the complaint has been processed by the Trade Committee, they'll have no choice but to lower the drawbridge, and the operation will continue. Thousands of litres of raw ingredients will pour onto the streets of Revachol. Not the east across the river, but the west. The vulnerable, the weary. How do you think they're financing this strike? There are thousands of unpaid dock workers going strong for the 4th month straight. With all due respect to these desert cacti, the contents of a few cash registers cannot provide for 2,000 men. The local businesses can scarcely provide for themselves. It's true they drove a number of the local businesses to bankruptcy preparing for this venture. I've talked to a few business owners. It was quite the shakedown. But the contents of a few cash registers cannot provide for 2,000 men. Precisely. Smuggled out of that very gate at night, most likely, then loaded onto lorries and driven to Jamrock. You simply need to find one driver who will open up to you. A lot of it. It comes in from large Samaran factories in South Safre, Sigai, and Sinyao. The literage they must get from this terminal alone must be oceanic. The lorries are still stuck at the roundabout. If the police is asking, one of the drivers might admit to it. The two might even be connected. As eager as I am to share it, Lieutenant, once the job is done, I am very sad to hear that, officer. If you change your mind, please let me know. If not, good luck finding your badge and your memory. In the meantime, I'll still try to assist you in any way I can. This disagreement is peanuts compared to what happens if you fail your main investigation. It may come to nothing, or it may just blow the case wide open. I can keep the drawbridge up for a few more days at least. You should have the time you need. In the meantime, let me know if there's any other way I may be of assistance. Until you come up with something at that intersection, I'm afraid I have little else to tell you. But I'll try. Ask, on the contrary, officer. There are yet camionneurs you have not talked to. And don't look so surprised. In a time like this, it would be strange if Wild Pines didn't have eyes on the harbour. Word has travelled, yes, but nothing of real substance has surfaced yet, I gather. Wild Pines has eyes on the intersection, but not ears. Yes, my eyes on the harbour have sent word to that effect. What have you discovered? In any case, it's a relief to know someone has looked into it. If I may ask, will there be an official investigation? I assume you discovered there is an operation. It doesn't really matter. And I do apologize for the surveillance. Wild Pines can't afford to be blind at a time like this. Yes. And will you start an official investigation? I've kept my eye on the communers. Even tried to get to know one. It's a mystery I'm already invested in. Which one of them, if any, could organize such a complex operation? Of course, detectives. In any case, you've held up your end of our arrangement. I trust you with the rest. Now it's my turn. I wouldn't normally break protocol like this, but the situation demands it. If you don't solve this murder, I'm afraid we may have a bloodbath on our hands. I don't believe that for one moment, officer. I'm just going to assume that departmental regulations prevent you from saying anything more. In any case, you've held up your end of our arrangement. Now it's my turn. Okay. I thank you for sharing that much with me. My employer thanks you as well. The scabs? You mean the huddled masses of Jamrock come to plead for work where the union refuses to? If they were organised by Wild Pines or its affiliates, then it would be a company secret. I could not share it with you. Not right now, at least. Yes, they were organised by Wild Pines. The contractors picked them up from Jamrock and drove them over. This is standard practice. The company reserves the right to man its stations. If these workers were organised by Wild Pines or its affiliates, then it would be a company secret. I could not share it with you. Not yet, at least. If these strikebreakers were organised by Wild Pines or its affiliates, then it would be a company secret. I could not share it with you. Not yet, at least. If the workers were organised by Wild Pines, then it would be a company secret. I could not share it with you. Not yet, at least. To answer your question, yes, they were organised by Wild Pines. The contractors picked them up from Jamrock and drove them over. This is standard practice. The company reserves the right to man its stations. Of course, anything to help. That's the man who was killed. I'm afraid this is a discussion for once we've cleared the lynching question. Better not tie the forestay to the backstay on this. I hope there is something else I can help you with. I fear I've told you all I know. It's an Oranese map of the waterways, or some version of it. It depicts the travels this man made while he was still alive. Yes. But please don't call me that. Joyce is much more efficient, as I was saying. If there's any way I may be of assistance, please don't hesitate to ask. Excuse me? I didn't hear you. Excuse me? I didn't hear you. Did you say money? My. Why'd you say that? Of course, that's garbage. You're a police officer. Shall we talk about something else, maybe? Why, yes, I am rich. How much money do you need? Hopefully not too much. I couldn't bring all of it with me, of course. How much do you need? Ah, yes, of course. I'm sad to hear that. How much do you need? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. The wind is a bit strong. Could you repeat that? How much money? Excuse me, sir. I don't have $1 billion real. Come now, nobody carries that much cash on their person. Particularly in a place like Martinez. I'd get robbed. That was the annual revenue of the entire Wild Pines group. Not my personal fortune. Try again, dear. A little lower this time. It is. Fast and silent. Try again, but lower. I like high-fidelity anything, sir. Now, try again, but lower. No, you don't. 1 real won't get you 2 pieces of bath tissue to rub together. So would I, but whoa. There is no such denomination. That's a good sum. Not too small. Not fantastically large. Like $1 billion. That's a reasonable sum. Not too small, not fantastically large. I really did bring as little cash as possible, to avoid attention. So here you are. The last bit of filthy lucre I can share. It's all right, Lieutenant. I really did bring as little cash with me as possible, to avoid attention. So here you are. The last bit of filthy lucre I can share. So, I hope I didn't just bribe you, officer. It may not be technically illegal under the Emergency Act, but still. And even if I did, I still would not give you 10,000 real. I would rather buy something nice with it, like expensive hi-fi or a new hydrodynamic E40 sail. That's a good sum, not too small. Not fantastically large, like $1 billion. That's a good sum. Not too small, not fantastically large, which he most certainly will do. Now, how else can I help the RCM today, besides supplementing its salaries? That's heartening to hear. There are too few honourable men in Revachol. Now, how else can I help the RCM today, besides supplementing its salaries? Au contraire, officer. I also feel queasy about the pittance the Coalition calls your salary. Now, is there something else I can do for you, or did you want to chat about dialectics some more? It's quite the, phenomenon. I agree. Now, how else can I help the RCM today besides supplementing its salaries? Of course. Now, how else can I help the RCM today besides supplementing its salaries? Now, how else can I help the RCM today besides supplementing its salaries? What would you like to know? The performative experience has ended. Good. What can I help you with? More lessons in basic reality? My favourite part of the day. Go ahead, ask me anything. Well, technically speaking, I'm not on it right now. By love, you did. Pleased to meet you, Lieutenant W. Freighter Dubois. I am glad to see a man of high qualification. The situation is precarious. What can I help you with, Lieutenant Freighter? Good morning, officer. I'm Joyce. Ah, good to hear. I wouldn't want to pry into a confidential police matter, but in the event you'd like to share more, I would like to know who it was. What is La Puta Madre? Nevertheless, he sounds terribly dangerous. I urge you to take care, officer. I wouldn't want anything to happen to you. High-intensity microwave frequencies. They're used for navigational purposes, to compress the inter-eastlery space. They may use it to communicate with incoming freighters. What is Speed Freaks FM? A runaway? Good work. This is a tangible lead towards solving the whole mystery. That speaks of the vastness and sophistication of the operation. Were you able to examine the radio? We contain multitudes, do we not? It might not be pertinent to her profession, but who knows? It may help you find her yet. Well, he sounds very dangerous. I urge you to take care, officer. I wouldn't want anything to happen to you. Not with what's coming. I appreciate you placing your trust in me. Thank you again for looking into this matter. You have my gratitude, and the gratitude of Wild Pines Group. I fail to see the relevance of this station, but I'll defer to your judgment. Was there anything else? Taking it out of commission will deal a blow to the smuggling network. Excellent work. Sensible for her to disable access to such essential information. A first-rate find. That should tell you all you need to know about their network, I would imagine. Right. It's really not the time or place to discuss such matters. What else did you find in your investigation? Now's neither the time nor the place to discuss such matters. What else did your investigation turn up? An ominous vision. At least you understand the gravity of the situation. And the map should prove very valuable indeed. So this goes beyond Jamrock. At least you now understand the gravity of the situation, and those maps should prove very valuable indeed. Yes, the Union won significant concessions, including overtime pay and a medical plan. This time their demands are more, I guess you could say, aggressive. The literage the local producers must get from this terminal alone must be oceanic. Well, here's your chance. The company has tried looking into this matter before, to no avail. Perhaps someone with your authority and resources might turn over the right stones. About the boat, now they won't even let me into the harbour. There's a 2-metre-20 racist behemoth blocking the gates. Every worker, a member of the board. Mr. Clare told him to, how did he put it? Fuck off, midget. Gaumont is short of stature, you see. And now, people are getting lynched, I hear. Behind the whirling in rags. A disastrous situation if there ever was one. You know, I don't mean to sound cold, but if you want something, you have to give something back. More than just guilt. We're in logistics. It's our business to know. And no. As far as the company knows, the Union does not produce it. They transport the ingredients for a cut. Unlikely, officer. I'm talking about the lorries. Once the ingredients reach Jamrock, they're distributed to a network of local manufacturers, well beyond our grasp, but in transit they may be vulnerable. Perhaps you've noticed that a number of lorries are tangled in a traffic jam at the roundabout just now. Interview the drivers who are still hanging about. One of them might be waiting for a crucial shipment. I assure you, officer, these are not the sort of parties you'd want to attend. Excellent. According to my reports, there are at least 3 lorry drivers lingering near the roundabout. Hopefully one of them will know something. I suggest you go back and canvass for more suspects. Now, per our original agreement, it's time for me to share company secrets with you. What? Thank you for the suggestion. I see the word has emotional resonance for you. For me, sadly, none. So I will stick with the factory name. Okay. How about Cordelechi 19? Why? The X something. The X what? Very absurd. Thank you for the suggestion. I will stick with the factory name for now, but thank you. Oh, I do like the sound of that. It sounds so decisive, so powerful. I'm not really big on moralist symbols. I think I'll stick with the factory name. But thank you. It's a pleasure craft. A 19 pacer. It also happens to be rated for Category 1 racing. Though these days I mainly use it for business. Then what does that say? Does it say, docking reserved for residents of Rue de Saint-Ghislain, 33A? Good morning, officers. I'm Joyce. Good evening, officers. I'm Joyce. Good afternoon, officers. I'm Joyce. Of course you're not. It was only a joke. How interesting. I wish you a swift recovery. In the meanwhile, you have my full cooperation, and the full cooperation of the Wild Pines group. You're back. Good. What can I help you with at this late hour? You're back. Good. What can I help you with? Of course. That's what I'm here for. Matter of fact, I don't. I have a medical condition of my own. Nothing unusual, though. I'm old, you see. It's a medical thing. It's called old. I'm old, you see. Don't worry. It's curable. With questions. Ask me some. It'll help pass this night. Thank you. I do what I can to remain presentable. Now, ask me some questions. It'll help us pass the night. Very keen of you, officer. I do also have sorderic syndrome from overexposure to the pale. It makes me roost in the night, like an owl. I almost never sleep anymore. If I do, it's for an hour. 4 tops. Go ahead. Ask me some questions. They are the only cure. Of course. Sadly, I need this one myself. It's hydrophobic, repels water, almost magically. The company makes them for offshore platform personnel. Very sturdy. What I can do for you is answer some questions. Nothing like talking to pass a rainy day. Very rugged. Good choice. Now, I suspect you had questions. Nothing like talking to pass a rainy day. Am I right? Yes. Keep in mind, this is a negotiator Mr. Clare has worked with before, and who was more than fair with him and the union. Yes. Extremely. Keep in mind, this is a negotiator Mr. Clare has worked with before, and who was more than fair with him and the union. And your opinion, detective, if I may ask? I'm a curious and talkative person, you see. Would you say the Débardeurs union is... I'm glad you asked. There was a woman, the previous forewoman of the union. She disappeared, yes. On the last day of the local chapter elections, her daughter phoned in and said she wasn't running anymore, or coming to work. Ever. End of story. Downright haunting, if you ask me. The Wild Pines suspected foul play, but what could they do? It was a union matter, does it? The company suspects foul play, but there's nothing they could do. It was a union matter. Sadly, the company records do not even give a name. She's just forewoman in private correspondence. Holly. I don't even know if it's a sir or given name, and I don't have access to the union's files. Indeed. The company suspects foul play, but there's nothing they could do. It was a union matter. The point of the presentation is, These kinds of things happen around the Clares. Watch out when you're dealing with him. I'm afraid I can't say any more until we've taken care of formal protocol. Did you? Wonderful, because it was manufactured in Rejoyce East by a company called Elysium, and its hull is 19 paces long. I think I'll stick with the factory name. But thank you, 33A, this old proletarian haunt here. As I said, plenty of people drive boats, of all social strata. Of course, I sympathise, but I'm afraid I simply can't share anything more until I've seen that badge. I assure you, it is no small matter for me either. We all share the responsibility for disarming this situation. I hope you have a badge for me as soon as possible. I'll be frank with you. If I'm going to break protocol, I need to be able to justify it to my superiors. They're going to want to see something tangible. The Union is conducting drug trade out of the harbour. It's an open secret in Martinez. Surely it must not come as a complete surprise to the RCM either. Perhaps it's time to look into it. Or you can find your badge, which honestly seems like a lost cause. Clever. Few suspect a woman in this sort of skullduggery. Good move on their part. Oh no, not a problem at all. Oh. And what happened to it, Detective? Keep in mind, this is a negotiator Mr. Clare has worked with before, and who was more than fair with him and the Union. I can't hear you, darling. Speak up, please. Yes. After they clear the terminal, we lose track. The actual production is taking place at various sites in and around Jamrock Quarter, north of here. What is that, Lieutenant? I am sorry for the inconvenience, Lieutenant Kisaragi, but we need them trapped here. This is a unique opportunity. I'm sure you understand. It may come to nothing, or it may just blow the case wide open. I suspect the traffic jam won't disperse for a few more days. You should have the time you need. That's a good sum. Not too small, not fantastically large. Like $1 billion. That's a good sum. Not too small, not fantastically large. The goalposts have moved, Lieutenant. In the absence of the badge, I have informed my employer there will be a probe. I cannot rescind that promise. To my knowledge, the drivers are still at the roundabout. I will tell you everything I know when you've finished with them. I can't see why it wouldn't be okay. Now, what can I do for you? My plan is to share information. The only way to do that now is by telling my employers you've kept your end, which I hope you will, because let me tell you, we are in dire waters. I am glad to hear that, because let me tell you, we are in dire waters. The sooner the probe is finished, the sooner I can share crucial information with you. The sooner the probe is finished, the sooner I can share crucial information with you. Now, is there anything I can do for you in the meanwhile? Tea, perhaps? Now, is there anything I can do for you in the meanwhile? Tea, perhaps? Frighten me. I'm not frightened easily, but I understand some things are best for the police to keep to themselves. I'm glad to hear, officer. I'm sure you'll find out just what that means soon enough. Everard Clare is a man of the utmost integrity. If you can say one thing about him, it's that he always puts the interests of the workers first. Then what is this positively destitute jetty doing here? And what about that fleet of skiffs? This unmistakably proletarian fleet of skiffs? As I said, plenty of people drive boats, of all social strata. This reality, how truly curious. A sort of philosopher-detective. What? Why not? I've heard the analogy made by a blindingly modern school of philosophy called bribery. It may not be as far-fetched as it sounds. Actually, I've heard the analogy made by a blindingly modern school of philosophy called bribery. It may not be as far-fetched as it sounds. There may be some detectives who are not philosophers. A deep synthesis. I'll assist you however I can, then. Go ahead. Ask. Ah, yes, the episode. Sounds like an acute case of encephalopathy, now that I think of it. But then I'm no doctor. Ask away, officer. I'll help however I can. Such an acute encephalopathy just doesn't seem possible. Surely you're joking. We may be here a while, then. Ask away, officer. I'll help however I can. Oh? Then why? A sort of spiritual quest. Something of ancient Ilmaran origin. I've never heard of an apocalyptic medical condition, but then reality is a strange place. Ask away, officer. I'll help however I can. I've never heard of a nationalistic medical condition, but then reality is a strange place. Ask away, officer. I'll help however I can. Nothing wrong with ancient ways. Our modern ones aren't necessarily better. Ask away, officer. I'll help however I can. A bird? A sphenicid? A flightless bird of the polar regions? Some sort of krill hunter? No, wait. You're an ancient ruin. A symbol of hubris and decay, half submerged in some salty sea. Ah! This is the pier of Rue de Saint-Ghislaine, 33A, where the tenants have been kind enough to rent me a slot. Of course you're not, my dear. I'm just terrible at guessing games. Of course. Ask me anything, or two. A pre-revolutionary tenement. Old buildings are called tenements, you see. And new buildings, bâtiments. After les bâtiments nouveaux. But 33A and 33B are not nouveaux. They're old. This one used to be 8 to 10 stories tall, a real high-rise by the standards of the last century. Built to mirror the skyscrapers across the bay in the Delta. That was before the war, of course. Mostly the urban middle class, I believe. This was once primo real estate. Before the cannons lopped 4 or 5 stories off. We may be here a while then. Ask away, officer. I'll help however I can. No, you're not joking at all, are you? Well, ask away, officer. I'll help however I can. We're in Martinaise, baby. Yes. We're on an island in an ocean, the world's largest body of water, the Insulindic. Martinaise is a district of Rejoyce. A very small district tucked away near the industrial harbour. North of the 881 and Jamrock. You would be excused for not knowing about it. Unimportant, they say. Forgotten even. Shelled to smithereens during the Revolution. It has its charms, just not this time of year. Oh, we're quite a way off. It's not really a sea, it's the Bay of Rejoyce. And the bay feeds into the ocean. I think it's fair to say so. Martinaise is about... I'm not a good ambassador. I've only been here once before, as a teenager. Not a lot has changed. There are ruins, a terminal, fishing boats, reeds, boys with boxy shoulders, a casual term of endearment popular among the 50-plus crowd. It's a disco holdover, pay it no heed. Caillou, as you already know. Imagine a pebble. A smoothed-over pebble amidst a great blue sea, misshapen, cracked. The cracks are the river Esperance. We're in the delta of this river, on the 6th branch, the Martinaise distributary, Caillou. Imagine a pebble. A smoothed-over pebble amidst a great blue sea, misshapen, cracked. The cracks are the river Esperance. We're in the delta of this river, on the 6th branch, the Martinaise distributary. Aren't we all? As I told you, Martinaise used to be a province, a workers' resort before the city swallowed it and the artillery did its part. Now the reeds are the real star of the show here. The further down the coast, the wilder it gets. This place used to be a province, a workers' resort before the city swallowed it and the artillery did its work. The reeds are the real star of the show here now. The further down the coast, the wilder it gets. Yes, I was slumming it with some girlfriends of mine. We had boats and... Don't hold it against me. The boys certainly did not. I would be happy to. What is a preposterously expensive education for, if not sharing? Perhaps. My intellectual vanity will be my undoing. Ah, yes. Back to the lowdown. A smart boy getting smarter. One basic term of reality at a time. Speak for yourself, officer. I'm well known in certain parts. As to the place, you're right. We are the girl in the old lady rags. Ah, yes. There's something very satisfying about discussing the fundamental facts of reality. Go ahead. Looks like a sullen and rebellious member of a teen infraculture. Yes, you and I belong to the supraculture. We're common, the herd. The music on the radio, the food in the chain restaurant, those are all too popular for the girl in the old lady rags. She prefers a fantasy world, an infraculture with its own dress code and vernacular. It is an illusion, I'm afraid. There is no refuge from the supraculture. Young people who dye their hair funny colours and wear old people's clothes are stupid, and their little rebellion is self-defeating. I can't. That's how simple it is. One may dye their hair green and wear their grandma's coat all they want. Capital has the ability to subsume all critiques into itself. Even those who would critique capital end up reinforcing it instead. And what would that be? I can see that, yes. I dabbled in those dark arts myself, not so long ago. I assure you, it was a thoroughly supracultural phenomenon. All permeating. Downright mandatory. Nothing infra about disco, baby. Yes, let's. Those days are long behind me. And even in the early 30s, I would say I was more of a new girl. Disco was a minor, but still enjoyable facet of the whole thing for me. Be my guest, the new. A cultural era. And the name of the decade it ravished, the 30s. It came out of post-revolutionary Rejoyce. It was ultra-liberal. It involved lots of partying, as you might imagine, and champagne-coloured everything. By the looks of it, that would have been when you came of age. Now, of course, you're much more grounded. A serious detective on a case called Reality. Speaking of, is there anything else? Wasn't it Guillaume Le Million who said, "If you can remember the new, you weren't there." Maximum brio, officer. Ah, yes. This is not very central to reality, is it? I can't be 100% sure, but I believe he died due to complications from venereal disease. I'm afraid no. But then again, one can't be entirely sure. It's all part of his mystique. Ask someone else and you may get a more champagne-coloured take. All of them. You? You're an officer of the RCM. Anyway, what other basic facets of reality should we discuss? Nothing more nor less than the de facto law enforcement body of post-revolutionary Rejoyce, Detective. Preciso mundo. It stands for Rejoyce Citizens Militia. Yes, that means not de jure. The RCM acts in what is poetically called the twilight of international law, both at the behest of the coalition government and to its chagrin. The RCM's responsibilities are defined by the Emergency, Wayfarer and Aliments Acts, 3 pieces of legislation keeping the city in a, let's be honest, laissez-faire stasis to the benefit of foreign capital. Truly moralist of you. The coalition government would applaud you for staying out of politics. And yet, there's nothing basic about your role, Detective. It's true that the RCM keeps everything the way our seemingly permanent, provisional rulers like it. Permit me to conclude with this. Who you are to me is the police, the only legitimate law enforcement authority in Rejoyce. And if those authorities drink so hard they need help recalling the basic terms of reality, well, I'm here to help. And if the law officials of our nation need help with the basic terms of reality, well, then I'm here to help. Glad to have been of assistance. The little that I know. Anything else? Glad to have been of assistance. The little that I know. Anything else I can do? Yet, on the other hand, I know these people. I deal with them daily. Let me tell you, dear, they are not fans of you. The post-revolutionary decade was a disaster for the coalition government. Rejoyce in the 20s was hell, especially on the west side of the river. Gang warfare, a botched privatization scheme, a nuclear pile meltdown. They called it the international zone because no nation wanted to claim responsibility. The RCM restored peace where the coalition failed, A true blue citizens' initiative. They will never forgive you. These are unimportant times, Detective. You and I were born after the dust had settled. 1,000th of a second too late for the big time, the revolution. It's a neurological disorder caused by a lack of vitamin B in the brain. Symptoms include a retrograde amnesia. It's quite serious. You should get yourself checked out. Well, it's either bariatric surgery or long-term alcohol use. That seems unlikely. It's not just me, Detective. All of Martinez has placed its chips on your success. I pray we've all bet wisely, of course. Well, I'll be here if you need me. Unimportant. As I said, the mineral rights were all distributed during the revolution, as were the bullets to the heads. All men are predators, dear. Nothing much to be done about that. It's all a matter of where you get to file your teeth. An ultra-liberal. It's a type of liberal. From the revolution. It's, not the moderate kind. What I am not is a basic term of reality. I am an ultra. I am the vilest of the vile. A traitor. A devourer of nations and infants. Yes. I am the nether creature of the forbidden swamp. I pushed the king under a shit wagon and betrayed the revolution. My kind surrendered the nation to financial colonists. No. Not like me. I am the nether creature of the forbidden swamp who pushed the king under a shit wagon and betrayed the revolution. Haven't you heard? I am a nether creature of the forbidden swamp, one of those who pushed the king under a shit wagon and betrayed the revolution. I can see you thought we'd gone extinct. After all, no sane person identifies as an ultra-liberal anymore. Not in broad daylight. You're a man of the left, no? Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, are you repulsed? I can see you thought we'd gone extinct. After all, no sane person identifies as an ultra-liberal anymore. Not in broad daylight. You've got Revachol in your blood. A real nationalist. No? Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, are you repulsed? I can see you thought our kind were all extinct. After all, no sane person identifies as this anymore. Not in broad daylight. I can see we're not so different, you know. Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, do you find me frightening? I can see you thought we'd gone extinct. After all, no sane person identifies as an ultra-liberal anymore. Not in broad daylight. You're a centrist at heart, a real moralist, no? Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, do you find me frightening? Perhaps you thought we'd gone extinct. After all, no sane person identifies as an ultra anymore. Not in broad daylight. Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, are you repulsed? Are you liberated enough to offer up your home on a plate for financial colonists? No, I think not. Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, do you find me frightening? We surrendered the nation to the financier pirates. No sane person identifies as an ultra-liberal anymore. Not in broad daylight. You're a man of the left. A true communard. Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, are you repulsed? We surrendered the nation to the financier pirates. No sane person identifies as an ultra-liberal anymore. Not in broad daylight. You've got Revachol in your blood. A real nationalist. Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, are you repulsed? We surrendered the nation to financier pirates. No sane person identifies as ultra-liberal anymore. Not in broad daylight. I can see we're not so different, you know. Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, do you find me frightening? I can see you thought I'd gone extinct. No sane person identifies as an ultra-liberal anymore. Not in broad daylight. You're a centrist at heart, a real moralist. Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself. Do you find me frightening? We surrendered the nation to financial colonists. No sane person identifies as an ultra anymore. Not in broad daylight. Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, are you repulsed? A devil, who being of great charm and guile sneaketh into the homes of the godly. That's a pity. I hope we can remain collegial despite the fact that I'm a high priestess of the capital. Don't take it personally. It was only business, as they say. That's a pity. I hope we can remain collegial despite my affection for regicide and multiculturalism. We didn't mean to kill the king, I assure you. That's a pity. I do hope we can remain collegial despite it all. Tell me, when you look in the mirror, do you not see a monster staring back at you? That's a pity. I hope we can remain collegial despite it. Remember, we were partners, whether you like to admit it or not. There's blood on many hands, I assure you. That's a pity. I hope we can remain collegial, despite my monstrousness. The Ultras didn't have anything against the king or the commune, you see. It was just business, honestly. I may have even preferred it, had the communards won. Who knows? They might really have built something better. But they didn't, because they lost. When the dust settled, the Liberals were the only ones left to clean up the mess. By virtue of their survival, they were handed enormous power to shape the future. This was all our last generation managed. I hope you do. I hope we are able to continue as friends, despite my scales and my need to infiltrate and betray your precious revolution. I do hope so. I hope we can remain collegial despite my affection for regicide and multiculturalism. We didn't mean to kill the king, I assure you. I do hope so. I do hope we're able to remain collegial despite it all. Tell me, when you look in the mirror, do you not see a monster staring back at you? I do hope so. I hope we're able to remain collegial despite it. Remember, we were partners, whether you like to admit it or not. There's blood on many hands, I assure you. I do hope so. I hope we are able to remain collegial despite my monstrousness. The Ultras didn't have anything against the king, or the commune, you see. It was just business. I'm afraid you'll find that every woman is a devil woman, detective. There are only aesthetic differences between one and the other. Ah, maybe you remember more than you let on. Despite whatever brain damage the alcohol may have inflicted. Ah, you know more than you let on. Philosopher detective of Precinct 41. Nothing's settled. It simply fades away. Like a lover who has lost their faith. Now, shall we return to reality? Steal, kill, and destroy. That they say we've been doing for over 4 decades now. Perhaps regrettably. I've had my fill for this century. In any case, I'm glad we can remain collegial despite my scaly bulk, and my perverse need to infiltrate and betray both kingdom and revolution. With due respect to our overlords, the eternal caretaker government that keeps Martinez a monument to the efficacy of its artillery, a fitting punishment, to be forgotten, if not forgiven, save a prayer for us in our chateaux on Ozon and in Stella Maris. I would not have relinquished sovereignty to the coalition. Not here in Martinez, and not in the Stella Maris or Delta Beachheads either. If not for my own sake, then for my daughters. We had an obligation to defend our sovereignty. We should have burned the whole Isola down rather than let them have it. Yes. Whatever else I am, I'm also a mother and a wife. Now, shall we return to reality? Yes, I suppose I am. But I wouldn't be a patriot anywhere but here. What world? The only one, I suppose. The world of matter. And its pale antipode. There is a term of endearment they coin for it. in the DeLorean century, when humanity was high on this world, discovering more and more of it, these archipelagos included. You have misimagined it. I don't have the power to convey to you the effect and geometry of the images that depict our world from below low orbit. It's Elysium. We used to think it was a sphere, but that is beginning to look less and less likely by the day. You wouldn't know it from the tabloids, but the ORG nations have been launching weather balloons into the lower ionosphere since the 30s. It does. There are those who would call it hell. There are those who would call it hell. Not in this case, no. That sounds more like something the Mesk petrofascists might say. It isn't enough to call us animals. Even animals aren't animals, but yes. We'll be fine. Don't worry. They're like you and I suppose. Living organisms don't identify with abstractions. Elysium is for particular beings. I don't know about things of that scale. My expertise lies in nations and trade routes, one or several layers below everything. But this is one of the greatest questions of our time. Maybe when they get the complete set together, it will jolt us out of our rut, bring us together. However naive it may sound, a term of hatred that originates, like many such things, with the Mesk petrofascists. I am sorry, dear. It must sound quite terrifying through the acute encephalopathy. Even scientific positivism isn't entirely convinced about what we're dealing with here, see? Everyone finds something worth holding on to in this world, however wasted its opportunities. They say there is a rarefied envelope of matter surrounding the darkened disk of our planet. That is, if we are still living on a planet. Or, to speak more plainly, imagine vast swathes of land disrupted by nothingness. You may have misimagined it. I don't have the power to convey to you the effect and geometry of the images that depict our world from below low orbit. That's looking less and less likely, Detective. You wouldn't know it from the tabloids, but the ORG nations have been launching weather balloons into the lower ionosphere since the 30s. Yes. Pale covers 72% of the surface. There are grey flares and prominences, even arcs above entire isolas. The images are blurry, but if there was a sphere in there, it certainly looks like it fractured a long time ago. But you already have. And you're doing just fine. Despite the rubble, you seem to be spooked. Please don't be. There's a steadily increasing trickle of images. Between the big three, they're piecing together a dark grey corona. There's a steadily increasing trickle of images. Between the big three scientific contributors, they're piecing together a dark grey corona. This place is an unmarked micro-settlement on the coast of Martinez. It's lovely, really. I'm thinking of buying it, yes, so I can spite Everard and spoil his plans for this place. I'm a petty person, I admit. Actually, yes. The thought did cross my mind when Mademoiselle Lillian over there told me about the fresh produce these women sell to restaurants on the Delta. Don't worry, I'll never get around to it. The information you pass to me will remain confidential. Let's get back to reality, shall we? This place could use a competent manager. There's so much to be done. But then I'll never get round to it, will I? Doubtless I'll be off someplace keeping social classes from each other's throats. Let's go back to the basics of reality, shall we? Great bodies of water, forest-covered surfaces, clusters of light where the cities lie. You've seen the montage. We all have. This world is enough. Of bodies of water and forest-covered surfaces, clusters of light where the cities lie. You've seen the montage. We all have. This world is enough. Let's. I am, after all, bourgeois and female. Hardly the perfect ambassador for the world. Oh, you want a picture of the world? There is no complete set yet, dear. They're having some trouble reaching orbit. Great things are difficult to achieve. For now, we're viewing the world from the inside, sideways. I am sorry, Detective. Philosophically speaking, it must sound quite terrifying. Even scientific positivism isn't entirely convinced about what we're dealing with here. It's like the crowning of the world. It's insane. Very disco. You'd love it. See? Everyone finds something worth holding on to in this world, however wasted its opportunities. Yes. The Pale is not, technically speaking, part of reality. Of course, Lieutenant. Let's try something else. I don't think your colleague would appreciate that. He has already been so patient with this whole exercise. Let's continue with something else, all right? You can ask about anything else in the world. Anything. The Lieutenant's right. Let's change topics. What do you want to know? Anything. Go ahead, officer. Ask me something else. Are you sure you're sure? Your colleague seemed adamant. It is the opposite of reality. Of course. Ask away. Okay. The Pale is the most dominant geological feature of the world, Detective. The separative tissue between the islas. It is the inter-islary mass. Isla is a Messinian word for a continent of matter, enveloped on all sides by the Pale. Also, isolation, or landmass. We used to believe there was only one. In the last 4 centuries, we have discovered 7. Mundi, Seol, Samara, Ilmara, Grad, Katla, and this, Insulinde, an oceanic isla. It comprises mostly of water. Muindi is the largest, Katla the coldest, Insulinde the bluest. What can I say? Each is perishing and dear. 22 kilometers from the center of the world. That soldering iron is the bank of the world building. The bottom floors are Insiacom. Coalition government, Insulindian Mission Command. Was there something else you wanted to know? I remember something about a lowdown. I hope we're able to continue as friends, despite my deeply felt need to infiltrate and betray the revolution, and then ensnare you to financial service. I hope we're able to remain friends, despite my scaly bulk and my love of regicide and homosexuality. The loss of sovereignty was not our plan all along, I assure you. I hope we're able to continue as friends, despite my scaly bulk and my intimidating liberal credentials. This was not the plan all along. I hope so. I hope we are able to continue as friends despite my scaly bulk and the insanity, bloodshed, and transfer of wealth that took place here. It was not the plan all along. I hope we are able to continue as friends despite my scaly bulk and the treacheries committed by my people against the suzerain and the commune. All right. What next? Nothing. It's just, true, that's all. The uniforms, the language. Let's have another question about reality, shall we? Ah, yes. That is what counts, I suppose. For my part, I was more of a new girl. Revachol? Revachol is what you call a city. Well then, reality is a strange place, getting stranger by the day. Ask away, officer. I'll help however I can. The great kind, history detective. They built this city to resolve history. Our part in it, at least. Our centuries. The nations of the Occident, or migrant workers from Seminine and Ile Marat, depending on your creed. In the DeLorean century. 380 years ago, we are standing on a fertile, self-sufficient island able to sustain up to 200 million people in the middle of the Insulindic Ocean, the world's connective tissue. It's where the money is. By that I mean conflicts. Ideological conflicts. The stuff of men. They say it's where the terrible questions of our time will be answered. The tensions are highest, the fault lines deepest. You can't get a venereal disease from that, can you? Indeed. There is a term of endearment they coined for it, in the DeLorean century, when humanity was high on this world, discovering more and more of it. These archipelagos included, of course, achromatic, odorless, featureless. The Pale is the enemy of matter and life. It is not like any other, or anything in the world. It is the transition state of being into nothingness. That's right. The negation of being. No, detective. We're safe. It begins there, 6,000 kilometers to the north, and even more to the south, east, and west. You are in the middle of the Isla. Yes. That is enough. Many cities are built much closer. An uproar of matter, darling. Rising into the Pale. Rolling. Evaporating even. A great vision. The area of transition between the world and the Pale is called porch collapse. Imagine a grey coronal mist, cold vapour marked by spores of an opportunistic microorganism, a mould that's adapted to grow at the edge of the unrest. It's difficult to describe, or even measure. Something whose fundamental property is the suspension of properties. Physical, epistemological, linguistic. The further into Pale you travel, the steeper the degree of suspension, right down to the mathematical. Numbers stop working. No one has yet passed the number barrier. It may be impossible. Pale when it's particular, this territory of Pale. The Pale when it's pale in its entirety. Once you've seen it, language balks at the difference. Oh, it is so difficult for us. It is possible to force dimensions on the Pale. In modern times, we can even compress its latitude, bouncing radio waves from one end to the other, shortening the path, but it is still hard for humans to navigate the Pale without getting lost or having our minds damaged. The most disco thing you will ever see, extensively. Some say the damage stems from extreme sensory deprivation. Others argue that Pale somehow consists of past information that's degrading, that it's rarefied past, not rarefied matter. They call it the blend over of the self. The Pale does not only suspend the laws of physics, but also the laws of psychology, maybe history even. The human mind becomes over-radiated by past. The logical positivists say, the dialectical materialists argue. It feels terrible. Absolutely terrible. International standards strictly limit civilian travellers to 6 days of Pale exposure per year. Up to my gills, officer. No, nameless detective of the Citizens Militia. I am a member of the entreprenetic business class. I'm cleared and trained for 22 days of Pale transit annually. No, Lieutenant Dubois. I'm entreprenetic business class. I'm cleared and trained for 22 days of Pale transit annually. Entreprenetics is the scientific study of the Pale, or a recent iteration of it by way of grad. The study of the Pale reaches back 6,000 years. The Pericarnassians called it the Western Plain. There are signs of pre-modern crossings. Successful navigation of the Pale relies not just on technical know-how, but intensive psychological preparation. Some of these tactics have been known for thousands of years. Nothing. We remain powerless before the Pale. The only real advance in Pale transit is the speed with which an aerostatic craft can pierce it. Less exposure leads to less effects later. Hybrid airships, detective. Conventional rotors or jet engines no longer add velocity after the point of reference for motion is suspended, once you've crossed from near Pale to far Pale. In essence, we throw them in and they come out the other end. If we throw them precisely, then they don't. The Pale outweighs reality 2 to 1. There is more Pale than there is matter, and the ratio is slipping. What do you think, detective? Oh no, detective. It's not. One of the few measurable effects of the Pale is that it is expanding at an unknown rate. Precisely. One of the few measurable effects of the Pale is that it is expanding at an unknown rate. An intuitive conclusion of that development is that one day the Pale will cover everything. But this sort of talk is mostly left to extremists. Most people, and indeed most private and government sector organizations, entire civilizations and religions even, Find handy ways to ignore or downplay that knowledge. I suggest you do the same. Yes, sweet reality. But before we do, tell me, Detective, is this the first time you're hearing this? Do you really not remember anything? This isn't really an inquiry, is it? You can't remember a single thing. This is the first time you're hearing about any of this. Of course. How silly of me. Another basic term, perhaps? Of course. Pardon my prying. Another basic term, perhaps? Or, then tell me, what do you think of the Pale? Beyond curious. Tell me, what do you think of the Pale? You really didn't know. This does not spell good for the investigation, Detective. If you don't know even this, then your colleague, Lieutenant Kisaragi, is competent. I checked up on him. And you have me. I will try to assist you in any way I can. I hope so. I truly do. If I may suggest, hold on to your colleague, Kisaragi. I ran a check on him and he is very competent. In the meanwhile, you have me. I will assist you in any way I can, even if we have to do it one basic term at a time. Even if we have to do it one basic term at a time. Yes. Carried in the hulls of airships. It's a horrific job. Automation will abolish it soon, one and all. They say pale is death, but for the universe, it doesn't look like you're doing the same. The suggestion was meant in earnest, Detective. Live life, yes? No, but please. A little context. We're not in such a hurry. We are where we are. I have no truer answer to give, unfortunately. It's quite easy. Every 100 years or so, our species gets together to decide what's next, who gets shot in the head, and who gets the mineral rights. It's a real kerfuffle. I am happy to oblige. Good luck, detectives. Yes, Lieutenant. Permit me to conclude with this. Who you are, to me, is the police. The only legitimate law enforcement authority in Rejoyce. So permit me to conclude with this. Who you are to me is the police. The only legitimate law enforcement authority in Rejoyce. Steel yourself, officer. Your colleague, Lieutenant Kisaragi, he is competent. I checked up on him. And you also have me. I will try to assist you in any way I can. Absolutely. My commitment here is long-term, indeed. I'm always at your service. Actually, yes. The thought did cross my mind when Mademoiselle Lilienne earlier told me about the fresh produce these women sell to restaurants on the Delta, and if those authorities drink so hard they need help recalling the basic terms of reality. Well, I am here to help, and if the law officials of our nation need help with the basic terms of reality, well, then I am here to help. Wonderful. Why, of course. We're talking Duke Out Central, full swing intraspecies warfare. No, I would say the apes were neutral. The zone of control is the third incarnation of Rejoyce. After the failure of the suzerain and the commune, then you would have died fighting against them. Long before the beachhead, our time is a shadow cast by that day. On the other hand, maybe you're right. On the other hand, yes. An acute thiamine deficiency can be exacerbated by alcoholism. Exacerbated means made worse. I see. Yes. A deluge of geopolitical questions. Him and tens of thousands of his wonderfully fascist kingsmen. It was a wild time, yes. King Guillaume had a nose for bad PR. He ran before it. What is the expression? Went down? Anyway, Gil got out alive and his nephew Frissel got shot in his place. I prefer the term risk-averse. King Guillaume was nobody's fool. He could smell a PR disaster brewing, so he got out alive and his nephew Frissel got shot in his place. The real king abdicated and lived out a long and productive life as a venture capitalist in Grade. Oh, lots of people. Even the king got shot in the head, or thrown beneath a horse, or drowned. Accounts differ. It was unceremonious. Just as well, he wasn't actually the king. Just the king's nephew. The 20s saw a decade of urban war, west of the river levelled, offshore platforms in flames. Still, It's regarded as an improvement on what came before. 08 to 19 was simply hell. The 30s? Things settled down in the 30s. Rejoyce East transformed itself into the world's largest tax haven, with the international community's blessing. For the first time in a long time, it seemed like things were going somewhere. Don't worry. Klas Mazov shot 15 million people in the head. But that was all the way over in Grad. Yes. The Insulindian deluge, they call it. Yes. The Red Deluge. The Insulindian deluge, they call it. No. It was a market mirage fueled by cocaine and quantitative easing. The 40s dispelled it like a cold splash, an Isola-wide hangover, you might say. And here we are, yes. And quantitative easing. It was a market mirage, unfortunately. The 40s dispelled it, an Isola-wide hangover, you might say. So, here we are. Welcome to reality, baby, forever. In 20 years, Revachol went from a king to a commune to a zone of control. She is forever. But the next thing she will be is something else. We could have had so much more. Every one of us. If only we played it right. Past. That's what de Brive, the leader of the communards, said, before she got a bullet in her head. Don't get me wrong, we could have had so much more. Every one of us. If only we played it right. All yours. That's been the motto of many an Indo tribe. There is something clarifying about that strain of ultraliberalism. Over. That's entropilism, the very height of late modernity. Evacuate this world. You may prove a truly modern man yet. I've no right to be dissatisfied. This shirt is Barbara Muscova, this raincoat is impervious to rain and is guaranteed for 100 years. My daughters will wear it. No, it's just good. Not that it would have mattered. In the end, the commune forced everyone to the barricades. Believe it or not, Wild Pines isn't even the most notorious example. That would be Saint-Baptiste. You can go quite far with that attitude. Oh, and the anarchists too. They shot them well. So well, one forgets they even existed, and you would have died, most likely. Not far from here, maybe even right here, during the beachhead, defending the coast the day the coalition took the city. Anxious to hear more about mineral rights or who got shot in the head? So a quarter of humanity simply lost their minds. And how would you stop a prion, a complex folding protein, unlife, with the technology 50 years ago? Those would be the communists. Generally speaking, 40 million people got shot in the head during the World Revolution. But the communists, they all got shot in the head. Modernity. They developed the marvels of the inter-eslary communication, telematic milieus, radiation, coloured plastics. Meanwhile, in Revachol West, the aftermath continues for the 5th decade. Capital is finished. But understand this. Its end won't free anyone. It will only lead to more suffering, no doubt. But we share the same time and position on the planet's crust. That counts for more than you think. Of course not. It was a highly infectious microorganism that destroyed brain tissue. The actual causes of the revolution were material. The pandemic only provided the spark. That's not Capri, dear. It's just a brand name snatched up by a Vespertine holding company. No, the real Capri is as dead as the king they bet on. Good hygiene. Really. A very moderate solution to an extreme problem. It's those sort of half measures that doomed the authorities in Grad. Liquidate? That's what King Philippe kept screaming from the Sol Aurum. Liquidate! Liquidate! It made people overthrow their governments, a poor remedy for prion disease. That was the attitude of most of the more moderate Indo-tribes, particularly those who supported the king, a city-state divided into free market zones under the everlasting interregnum of the coalition of nations, And you, of course, the citizens' militia. No, almost certainly. The Commune would have forced you. Such was the fate of the undecided. And what is your official position, Lieutenant? 43 years. Hard to fathom, I know. Time flies. They pick the winning side. That's why they're here, and others are not. The turn of the century revolution? Don't answer it. It's a trick question, always. That's the can't-do attitude that truly defines late modernity. You may prove a modern man yet. Perhaps it wouldn't have turned out that way had I been in charge. I might have bet on the king and led the Pines to doom. They are what they are. Who knows? An afterbloom may yet come. The revolution began in '02 on the Isla of Grad, though by the end nearly the whole world had gotten involved. You and everyone else. But that's got nothing to do with preventing the revolution. Ah, well. What was, I guess. I would have sided with the cannons. If you'd seen the calibers of the things, you might have too. Perhaps it's better I was born when I was. Good question. What would you have done differently? And I asked you. Past less detective of the citizens' militia. What insight has acute encephalopathy given to you? And I asked you. Philosopher detective of the citizens' militia. Coupris, resplendent, both gone now. Those that survived mended their ways. They're all ultras now. 10 of the 14 Indo tribes got it wrong. Feld, Coupris, Tricentennial. So I suppose I would have been in good company. In the end, they liquidated the Sol Aurum, melted the palace cube down to gold and platinum, and sold it for bullets. Strange times. From Rejoyce and Grad? Not far. The world managed to cauterize itself. Mazov's government was overthrown in '08, and the coalition crushed the Rejoyce commune 2 years later. It was the end. Why? You and I, officer. Our lives in the zone of control. I see. 1/10 of humanity. The key of history is in the lock. Keep turning at any cost. It wasn't a who, but a what. A pandemic of Zarat, a particularly virulent prion disease, which the authorities in Grad proved unable to contain. Then Mazov came along and overthrew the government. Understandable. Anyway, enough sentimentality. Is there anything else you want to know? When they failed to step up, Mazov and his party stepped in. In this particular case, maybe a more robust state response might have been appropriate. I don't know about that. Indeed. They piled them in mass graves in Ozon. And, well, that's the last anyone heard of those people. Did they ever? Before they got shot themselves, they shot 2 million people. The liberals got the mineral rights. And by mineral rights, I mean everything. Liberals are usually middle-class people, detective. Or the remaining gentry. The beneficiaries of the pre-revolutionary arrangement. Some were rich enough to stay with the constitution, with monarchy. Big mistake. Others bet on the revolution. They were called the ultras or ultra-liberals. They fared well. They didn't win so much as survive. We were the last ones standing when the war ended. Everyone else got shot in the head, remember? To foreign intervention. The coalition. Those people really took the mineral rights. The liberals took everything that wasn't nailed to the ground. The coalition took the ground. The ocean, the laws, and the people. The coalition of nations. Grad, Mesk, Vesper, Messina, Oranje, and Sur-le-Clay. The armed centre of the world. They landed here and ended the revolution. It was the moralist thing to do. The moralists believe in keeping everything exactly the way it is. They believe in mineral rights and not shooting people in the head, at least not in the same manner and volume as the others do. They are the long-standing provisional rulers of Rejoyce now, the coalition government. This is their zone of control. They embolden the RCM with crumbs of the same law they took. Technically speaking, You are a moralist. An almost endearingly moralist standpoint. It must be hard to take a moderate approach to head shooting in your line of work. Of course. Not easy to be moderate about head shooting in your line of work. A devout man of the centre. Hard to come by. It's good to have someone who takes a moderate approach to head shooting. In your line of work, I mean. That's the way of history. Voracious. I'm up for it. What'll it be? Too much reality at once can prove too much. There's plenty of time later. For now, is there anything else I can help you with? About head shooting? Indeed. Zerat is a highly infectious microorganism that destroyed brain tissue. The actual causes of the revolution were material. The pandemic only provided the spark. Welcome to reality, baby. Which one? Actually, it doesn't matter. King Guillaume has always been my favourite. He could smell a PR disaster brewing. So he got out alive and his nephew, Fricelle, got shot in his place. Good for you. Now, back to the impending bloodbath. I think I know where you found it, Officer Dubois. In that motor carriage protruding from the ice over there. You found it in the motor carriage you drove into the sea. Do not gloat, officer. These are grave matters, yes. I'm afraid this strike may descend into a small-scale civil war, with possible consequences for all of Rivershoal West. It doesn't matter. What matters is you found it, and not a moment too soon. That is exactly what it means. What I'm about to tell you is more pressing, I assure you. I have an indirect role to play, I'm sad to say. My employer experienced a momentary lapse of faith in me. In that moment, they elected to deploy a private military contractor as an insurance measure. They called it my security detail. They were dispatched after I relayed the union's initial offer, a member of the board. I tried to convince my employer it was simply an opening gambit, like you suggested, or a joke even. They did not appreciate the humour. A member of the board. I tried to convince my employer it was simply a piece of rhetoric, or a joke. They did not appreciate the humour. Absolutely not. These mercenaries are muscle, pure and simple. They are meant to intimidate the union into surrendering. Every worker a member of the board. I tried to convince my employer it was simply a piece of rhetoric and not a serious demand, but the stridency of it seems to have spooked them. Crenelle, an Oranese military company. As far as I know, 3 arrived in Martinez. They report to me sporadically, but they do not answer to me. To be frank, our relationship is deteriorating. No, we need to discuss this now. There isn't time to waste. Bloodbath, remember? They wear ceramic armour, have semi-automatic weapons and years of combat experience. They also have trauma and stressor disorder and no idea how to conduct themselves in an urban civilian environment. The story is, one of them, the colonel, I don't know his real name, sexually assaulted a local woman while he was drunk and separated from his unit. This allowed some of the more militant union members to subdue him. He was taken out behind the whirling in rags and lynched. Last Sunday night. Nothing. Mr. Clare refuses to let me into the harbour. I have not been able to discuss this matter with anyone there. The remaining 2 Crenelle contractors carry out their orders, for now. It's a smokescreen. In secret, they are conducting an independent military tribunal into the lynching. Once this investigation is concluded, executions will follow, whether to execute one, some, or all of the union militants. My only hope is that yours provides a single, concrete suspect before they indiscriminately pick theirs. Simply put, my only hope is that yours provides a single, concrete suspect before they indiscriminately pick theirs. Simply put, if you don't pin this on someone good and do it fast, they will identify and execute everyone present at the lynching. This in turn will force the union to respond. Have you ever seen a hornet invade a beehive, detective? It's not pretty. Have you ever seen a hornet invade a beehive, Lieutenant? It's not pretty. It was the union who strung him from that tree. My hope is that you provide a single concrete suspect before Crenelle indiscriminately pick theirs. Simply put, they won't. My only hope is that yours provides a single, concrete suspect before they indiscriminately pick theirs. Simply put, Surely you're joking. These people are killers. My only hope is that yours provides a single, concrete suspect before they indiscriminately pick theirs. Simply put, these men work in tandem using semi- and fully automatic firearms. Their armor is virtually impenetrable to muzzle-loaded weapons, even yours. Most union workers don't have guns at all. As I said, a bloodbath. It will not be a pretty sight. Clean. Yes. Nothing will grow here for 20 years. Crenell will send in gunships and the coalition government will follow suit. Too many things have already gone wrong. Lieutenant W. Freighter Dubois, too many things have already gone wrong. Nameless, badgeless detective of the citizens' militia, too many things have already gone wrong. Many bleak scenarios have already come true. Lieutenant W. Freighter Dubois, many bleak scenarios have already come true. Nameless, badgeless detective of the citizens' militia, many bleak scenarios have already come to pass to lead us here. It doesn't have to be like this. Lieutenant W. Freighter Dubois, it doesn't have to be like this. Nameless, badgeless officer of the citizens' militia, it doesn't have to be like this. All we can do is keep that which is not from following suit. One single concrete suspect delivered into civil court, and I may be able to defuse this situation. All we can do is keep the rest from going the same way. One single concrete suspect delivered into civil court, and I may be able to defuse this situation. One single concrete suspect delivered into civil court, and I may be able to defuse this situation. I am sorry to confirm it. All we can do is keep the little that is not from following suit. One single concrete suspect delivered into civil court, and I may be able to defuse this situation. All we can do is keep the rest from following suit. One single concrete suspect delivered into civil court, and I may be able to defuse this situation. One single concrete suspect delivered into civil court, and I may be able to defuse this situation. I am sorry to have been the bearer of bad news. If there is anything else I can help you with, please ask. It is very far from disco. My only hope is that you provide a single, concrete suspect before the mercenaries indiscriminately pick theirs. Simply put, if you still have access to the ICP's database, you could run a better background check than I ever could. It may take some time, though, not much. Their public resume is relatively good, as far as private military contractors go. I believe they were once called Downwell. They boast a long list of clients: Saint-Baptiste, Welchman-Lorentz, Eintracht. A warning sign, however. The operations concerned all take place in third or fourth world countries. Guarding facilities, escort missions and such. I wouldn't go as far as to use that term, detective. Yes, all the good conflict corridors, Supramundi, Yesut, the Seminese Islands, countries that don't have a good record reporting atrocious military conduct on their soil. Sadly, no. Before this happened, I had little interest in them. Now that I do, I don't have the resources. Yes, paramilitary death squad is a bit rich. But yes, were it up to me, I would have at least vetted them more thoroughly. In my line of work, it pays to do your research. I was prepared to deal with the RCM. I did not think I would be dealing with a group like Crenell. Ah yes, your condition. The International Collaborative Police maintains a database for these sorts of things. Perhaps you should consult it. It was just a suggestion. Perhaps the arrangement no longer stands. Excuse me, it's not my place to pry. If it does, you should take advantage of it. Just a suggestion. Or he didn't. This is information passed on to me from some teenagers loitering around the canal. I cannot testify by it that the man was killed because he assaulted a local woman. I've asked around a bit. This seems to be the accepted story around Martinez. Last Sunday night, at the Whirling in Rags, the hostel by the gates. Supposedly, the colonel was drunk, maybe on narcotics too. If you mean did I see him alive? Yes, but I did not know him. Liked is a bit strong. He was the most charismatic among them. He handled all the talking. His departure left a major gap in the group's communication skills. Lely, his service name, a nom de guerre most likely. He wouldn't divulge his full name. Only one of them did. A bad sign if there ever was one. One is a man, Corty, they call him, a nickname as well. The other a woman, Phyllis DePaul. Corty is the gunner, I believe. DePaul is a radio operator. I can't remember. He was 40 or 50. It's hard to say which. He had a combat injury on his lower jaw. It made it difficult to estimate his age or gauge his facial expressions. He was Occidental, I think. Light brown hair, a mixed accent, Oranese, or Messinian maybe. His injury gave him an accent all his own. In a way, it was humanizing. He had to learn to speak through it, through the injury. That's all I know, I guess. I only met him once. They've gone to ground, as it were. I don't recommend seeking them out. For one, they're likely to be armed to the teeth. They've gone to ground, as it were. I don't recommend seeking them out. For one, they're almost certainly armed to the teeth. They don't have the same respect for the Rejoyce citizens' militia as I do. To put it bluntly, they think you're vigilantes. Ghetto savages. It will not be a fruitful meeting. You're likely to run into them eventually. When that happens, I'll be in a better position to mediate if I don't appear involved. That's wise. Our goal is to avert catastrophe. Besides, you're likely to encounter them sooner or later. That is a bad idea, one I won't be a party to. Somehow, I doubt that lecturing them on the legitimate use of force will persuade them to stand down. Of course. Excuse my hesitation before. Sorry. I was trying to see if I can read the web of interdependencies between these points. The stars. I can't. But that's how you read this story. The points themselves don't have letters, numbers, anything. Their size, location on the body, and distance from each other tells you what they represent. Close. Port cities. This is an Oranese map of the waterways, a sailor's tattoo worn by wayfarers of the Dolorian century. Over 300 years ago, the sailors would mark their bodies to map their travels. Quite a few. Vredefort, the Oranese capital, traditionally stands on the right shoulder. He started somewhere near here, I think. Rejoyce. Those are the two constants. Vredefort on the shoulder, and Rejoyce in the heart. They started the tradition of these maps right after the discovery of Insulinde, at the dawn of the Inter-Isolary Age. Until the executions start? Truthfully, I don't know. It depends on their progress identifying the members of the lynch mob, and their impatience. Not on this matter. I'm afraid they consider this a personal initiative. Port cities? On the oceans? This is an Oranese map of the waterways, a sailor's tattoo worn by wayfarers of the Dolorian century. As early as 300 years ago, the sailors would mark their bodies to map their travels. I can't. This man was no sailor. And these are no ports. I can understand geographic fragments, but not their meaning. The sailor's soul would use it to fly back home if they should die abroad. This is a sort of contraption, to be reeled back in by. The silver cord, they would call it. The times have changed. That is precisely what the sailors feared when they drew these maps. A fear of drowning within one's own corpse. I would say he's near the Arcade Islands by now, ready to exit the Insulindian and into the Pale. If I've read his home address correctly, it's a matter of days, not weeks. Whatever I can help you with. We need to contain the situation. Then he made his way to the Pretto Grande, through what I think must be the Stutz Canal, an artificial channel through the Occident. From the Pretto, he sailed to the Insulindic Ocean, first the Semines Islands, then this. Is that all? That makes sense to me. We have no more use for a map of the waterways, just like we don't need sailors the way we used to. This is what the custom would morph into on the Occident. Mercenary tattoos. His platoon members? The other contractors. Though I do not suggest you go and show them that picture. This man was their friend and comrade. Do what you have to do, Detective Dubois. I don't think deciphering that tattoo should come before public security, but if you should wade into the mob to find out, I couldn't stop you. Do what you have to do, Detective. I don't think deciphering that tattoo should come before public security, but if you should wade into the mob to find out, I couldn't stop you. I am relieved you think so. I don't think deciphering that tattoo should come before public security. Is there anything else I can help you with? I'm not trying to reassure you, officer. Quite the opposite, in fact. Cronell, an Oronese military company. As far as I know, 3 arrived in Martinez. They report to me sporadically, but they do not answer to me. To be frank, our relationship is deteriorating. Good. Then you've made progress. It's imperative that you move fast. The tribunal will not be patient. That would afford a good vantage point. Still, I hope you heed my advice. There's no need to kick the hornet's nest. That may be so. I still hope you heed my advice. There's no need to kick the hornet's nest. I hope I can answer it better. That would afford a good vantage point. In any case, it's practically inaccessible. Heavens no. I'm not an undercover agent. There's a short wave at the ship's wheel. Of course it bothers me, Lieutenant. But my hands are tied. How would my employer react if it appeared I were intervening on behalf of the Union? I have. And they will. However, these orders take time to reach what is basically a rogue unit out in the field here. Until they do, it's all on us. The remaining contractors. Their tribunal. It's what they believe. Either way, he's alleged to have sexually assaulted a woman. Sometime later, a group of dock workers got their hands on him. That's a good question, officer. I don't have the slightest idea. As I said, it's a rumour. About a rumour. In any case, it's what the Colonel's remaining colleagues believe. I can't. This man was no sailor, and these are no ports. I can understand geographic fragments, but not their meaning. Then we're on the same page, as grim as it may be. My only hope is that yours provides a single, concrete suspect before they indiscriminately pick theirs. Simply put, it's not good. No. My only hope is that you provide a single, concrete suspect before the mercenaries indiscriminately pick theirs. Simply put, not a terribly good actor, that one. Still, the Pale was thought to be impregnable, perpetual. Irene la Navigateur, the Queen of Suresnes, sent 8 expeditions, one after the other, into the mass at the edge of the world. 5 of the crews did not return. 2 did, but had lost their minds. Until after years of trial and error, and the development of a strict psychological regime imitating the creation process of poetry, the 8th expedition returned sane and intact. They told of a new continent of matter. They told the Queen and her counsellor, Dolores Day, that the Pale had begun to condense, day after day, hour after hour, minute after minute. The nations who colonised this isla called theirs Muindi, the world. It was all they knew, all they thought would be. That there would be something more was a gamble, akin to another world, or life after death. But they could not. They were sane and conscious, as islands began to appear on the horizon. There are 78,000 uninhabited islands in the Insulindian archipelago, officer. The freckled face of God. The phenomenon has never again been encountered. For a time, the crew thought they were experiencing a hallucination. The mass hand proclaimed, "Lancielinde, Lancielinde," the signal to wake up. On the second day, a great skua was shot down above the flagship Lézargique. The bird was preserved and brought back, along with pollen. 4 years later, the Queen's counsellor was proclaimed Her Innocence Dolores Day, the elected world spirit. The age of humanism, internationalism, and parliamentary rule followed. We were high. Which isn't to suggest our talks constitute corporate espionage. Even if they did, it would be fine. But they don't, since you logged the money as a donation, and this is clearly just gossip between friends. Of course, Detective. Should something come up later down the road, don't be afraid to drop by for a chat. Oh. That's so helpful of him. So very, very helpful. And how is that going? Do you have any leads on that gun? Yes. As you said, of course. Thank you for the advice. I'm glad you are here to assist. Your other dealings with Everard are still of considerable interest to me. Your gun, yes. Do you want to talk about something else now? What is happening? Sweetheart, please stop repeating that now. Please. Yes, Mr. Everard. This gossiping idea was terrible on my part. I take it back. Do you want me to take you to a hospital? Sir, officer, good God. That's beautiful. A Villiers 9mm. Front-loaded? 2 or 3-barreled. Villiers and LaSalle was one of the original 14 Indo tribes of Revachol. Did you know? Artillery and ballistics. Before the revolution, of course. They belong to some Gottwalders now. Villiers and LaSalle was one of the original 14 Indo tribes of Revachol. Did you know? Artillery and ballistics. Before the revolution, of course. They belong to some Gottwalders now. What else? It helps to sometimes hold inventory of the things you've achieved, you know. Clears the soul. Well, maybe he's not as helpful as you thought then. Is there anything else? Did he now? Well, then it should be any day now. Unless, of course, he's lying to you. Anyway, was there anything else you've heard? Did you now? What sort of borscht is he making? The strike brew. That's a classic. And by turn up the heat, I presume you mean put more alcohol in it? Why, if I may ask? Why make them more drunk? Aren't they corked enough already? Very curious. A very curious thing to do. What else? A referral, you mean? I take it this was for someone in the RCM. Don't answer that. Such referrals may sometimes get you information from a man like Everard. Did it? Oh my. A real door. Of course. The RCM has the right to inspect any premises. How else would you catch the bad guys? The information was useful, I hope. That's good to hear, Detective. Police work is rarely pretty, but it sounds like you did what you had to do. My. What I'm hearing is you inspected a premises because you suspected that it was involved in the narcotics trade. Misinformation. This is all because we haven't shared information on the lynching yet. See? Already the adversary uses it to their advantage. Don't let him. I wouldn't have taken Everard for a saber rattler. Was he surrounded by union men he wanted to impress? Yes. That's the talk about town. The Hardy Boys, they're called. Find the name rather amusing, honestly. Or he wants you and me to believe he wants to go to war. I'll think it over, Detective. Thank you for relaying this information to me. What? Yes, of course. Everything's fine. Perhaps there's more gossip you'd like to share. How benevolent. Hopefully they'll help you sort this whole business out, if they haven't already. What you've said is quite enough. You've given me a lot to consider, and may have helped me prevent this conflict from escalating. That is only fair. It looks like you may untie this knot yet. Oh my. Very interesting. So the militant wing is protecting one of their own. Well, I hope it yields something. Otherwise you'll have opened that door for naught. Anything else? Naturally, Detective. There are lighter topics to gossip about. Sounds like he has you running errands, Detective. A well-established dominance ritual. Where did he have you deliver it? Ah, yes. I've been meaning to go there. Here. Oh, no. What does that bloated hellbat want with my little cinder-block town? No, don't tell me. I don't want to know what he has in store for this place. Probably a statue. It's a statue, right? A giant statue of him. Or better yet, his twin brother. Practically the same thing, but makes him seem less like a psychopath. A youth centre with Edgar Clare's statue on top of it. Go ahead. Help him. Make it so. I have no power to stop him. A youth centre with Edgar Clare's statue on top of it. What? 35, I think. Why? I have mutant's feet. Very small, yes. I'm sad I'll never have the time, Detective. I've always wanted a dilapidating fishing village. Yes, I was slumming it with some girlfriends of mine. We had boats and... Don't hold it against me. My paramour certainly did not. I think I was in my 20s, actually. I'm ashamed to say I wasn't a teen anymore. It must have been my early 20s, because I remember a particularly vile disco track. I'm over-radiated, Harry. I do silly things sometimes, out of pale-related illness. Like sail over here. The moral of the story is, I'm over-radiated, Detective. Do silly things sometimes, out of pale-related sickness. Like sail over here. The moral of the story is, I'm glad to see your short-term memory appears intact. In any case, I wasn't a teen anymore. I would have been in my early 20s. I remember a distinctly vile disco track. Not overly so. It's not like this was the only place we visited. Me and my girlfriends from Azon with our shiny boats. Like Reavers. He's probably dead by now. Even his shack is long gone. Not that it matters. These buildings are all carbon copies of one another. Do not spend 22 days a year in pale transit. Don't waste your 20s slumming it with your stupid friends. And don't deliver Everard Clare's mail. Are you satisfied, Detective? What else can you tell me about your mail delivery quest for Everard? Do you think it will improve the place, full of ghosts and ancient memories? Has this errand yielded you any information? Until then, is there anything I can help you with? Not as vile as me. It is. But not as vile as me. A takeover. If they're taking it, they most certainly are not. Crenell has 1,000 men on their payroll. The next batch will be a platoon of 20 men and a gunship. Taking it. Then we're talking about a war. Everard needs to let me into the harbour at once. We need to talk about this. An insane goal. Crenell has 1,000 men on their payroll. The next batch will be a platoon of 20 men and a gunship. You can't simply trick them. An insane goal. Crenell has 1,000 men on their payroll. The next batch will be a platoon of 20 men and a gunship. The one after that, 100. No. It's naive of me. He sent you. This is the negotiation now. And if he does not avert his course, it will be a war negotiation, Detectives. And if he does not change course, it will be a war negotiation, Detective. You think Crenell is the only contractor Wild Pines employs? They'll only be the start. More will come. The question is, how many years and lives will it take? What do you suggest I do? They have the support of Rejoyce West. They have the position. This will be a prolonged and bloody conflict. The only question is how long? And how bloody? Everything affects the decision-making process, Detective. I'm afraid we won't disco our way out of this one. Like the previous leaders of the Union were assassinated. I suspect by Everard and Edgar themselves. I admit there's some poetry in the idea, and like poetry, it's also useless. There would still be Edgar. They factored it in. The Union is them, and they are Martinez, but it is not a bluff. I assumed so before, that you're part of his ploy even. Telling me this, to keep assuming would be wishful thinking at this point. They will last as long as the drug trade in Jamrock provides them with support. With all due respect, that'll be a long and bloody time. Of course. Your job is to clean up after them. And it looks like there will be a lot of cleaning to be done in the near future. Do you think it's within my authority to give it to them? Do you think I can control the board and the shell-shocked mercenaries they've sent? There will be no gloaming. There will be slow, simmering, hideous civil war. The beginnings of a failed state. No rapture. Just ugliness. He's right. There will be slow, simmering, hideous civil war. The beginnings of a failed state. No apocalyptic rapture. Just ugliness. Such a thing isn't in my character. I will take your advice, Lieutenant Chieffrater. I will surrender Terminal B to the Union. I will take your advice, Detective. I will surrender Terminal B to the Union. I will surrender Terminal B to the Union. What happens will happen. What will I do? Did I ever tell you how they discovered this Isola? During our Reality lowdown. Did I ever tell you how they discovered this Isola? During our talks, it may be the only break we've ever caught as a species. The last one for 400 years. Typically arrogant of me. Absent-minded as well. Inter-Islary travel has left holes in my consciousness, I'm afraid. We do for this. It was anything but normal. There was no precedent. People thought she was punishing the admirals, or had gone mad, or both, slowly raining down until it formed a vast ocean, a total shift in human comprehension of reality. On the second day, a great skua was shot down above the flagship Lézargique. The bird was preserved and brought back, along with pollen. There was no precedent for such an undertaking. People thought she was punishing the admirals, or had gone mad, or both. On Caillou, the Pebble, the largest of the fertile, uninhabited islands of the northeast Insulindian archipelago. 4 centuries and 2 revolutions later, the first living, autonomous organism. Proof of reality. It's the symbol of Insulinde, detective. The coat of arms of the suzerain and the wings on the crest of the commune. In your defence, it is a nasty creature who plucks food from the throats of lesser birds. Yet much like Rejoyce, it is also magnificent and rare. Imagine the suzerain of seagulls. The nations of Mundi proceeded to discover 5 more Isolae, or they discovered us, all in the rush of the great inter-Islary reconnection, but these others weren't uninhabited. We had to kill people there, wipe out indigenous populations, gunboat economies, or they came to do the same for us, or had done to each other. But here, there was no one but the skua, the Liliat Sea, and the Blood Beach, and the River Esperance. It was the new world. The Mondials used it to amass the greatest concentration of wealth mankind has ever seen. Rejoyce, the suzerain, revolution, poverty, and the mercurial rise of capitalism. But what was done exactly? Revolution, the rise and crash of capital, international intervention. It is. Soon it will be spring and everything will blossom. We will see. The age of capital has only begun. I will talk to my employers in person. We will amputate and cauterize Martinez. If you handle the situation on the ground. Yes, Mr. Clare has a 2-month head start. I can't let it grow any bigger. And I've exhausted all my options from here. You are the citizens' militia. There are no superiors. That's right. We're all answerable to someone. I am. Here I am. I am the face, and I'm here to answer. Rejoyce Leyton. I have not deceived you. I showed you who I was. Rejoyce Leyton. I have not deceived you. I told you exactly who I was. Rejoyce Leyton. I will try to do so, Harry. If not for you, then for Rejoyce. I will try to do so, detective. If not for you, then for Rejoyce. In short, Harry, we will revoke the pigment standard. Your money will no longer need to be black like chitin, and there will be so much more of it. In short, detective, we will revoke the pigment standard. Your money will no longer need to be black like chitin, and there will be so much more of it. I know. I don't want to do that, Harry. I don't want to do that, detective. I do not want to shoot myself in the head. Harry, I will try keep the best interests of the Moralist International in mind during our talks. I will try keep the interests of the Moralist International in mind during our talks, detective. Is it? Keep the peace, and I will keep my end of the bargain. One last thing, Lieutenant Dubois. I've given the matter much thought and come to this conclusion. You're not an amnesiac. You're insane. I know, because I, too, am insane. I just hide my illness better. And I'm rich. I'm overexposed, baby. My travels take me through the Pale dozens of times a year. I've got the longing. And I've got it bad. The same strict psychological regimen the 8th Admiral developed when he crossed the Pale and discovered this Isola, the Volta do Mar. It's used by inter-Islary travellers and other troubled souls, even to this day. Watch out for yourselves. They will strike soon. Watch out for yourself. They will strike soon. No, Detective. No one's as insane as you. A confrontation is imminent. They have followed in your footsteps. As your investigation reaches a climax, so does theirs. They are your shadow. Arm yourselves. Armor yourselves. Protect their targets. Violence may be unavoidable, but we can limit the casualties soon. I do not know precisely. They have cut off all communication, you see. They know I've been feeding you information. One last thing, nameless detective. I've given the matter much thought and come to this conclusion. You're not an amnesiac. You're insane. Après la vie, la mort. Après la mort, la vie encore. Après la mort, la grille. Après la grille, le monde encore. First, there won't be a youth centre. Whatever he has told you or the residents, it'll be something horrific, perhaps even worse than a statue. So, yes, I do. A fishery. I've been speaking with Lillian here. She gave me the idea. The infrastructure is all here, and with my connections, sadly, it's just one of the million things I'll never get round to. I just have to accept that I'll never be the rich candy girl who goes around solving people's problems with money. I disagree. It sounds like a strike brew. And you made them more drunk? Aren't they corked enough already? Weird. Oh no. One of the positive things to come from the revolution is the unhindered exchange of information, you see, even when it comes to trade secrets. Lieutenant Dubois! Harry! Harry! Are you all right? Detective! Is everything all right in there? I'm much better now that you're back. You seem to be caught in some sort of loop. I'm not sure exactly, but you seem to be caught in some sort of loop. No, not at all, I'm afraid. You seem to be caught in some sort of loop. Never mind the details. We've wasted enough time as it is. What matters is that you seem to have got out of it. Now, please ask me something else before it happens again. Something that, preferably, doesn't include the words Mr. or Everard. And, in the process, you turned up some information relevant to your investigation. Only from Everard. Surprisingly, yes. Everard is a showman at heart. I should be. In my youth, I had a brief dalliance here in Martinez. He was an older man with impossibly broad shoulders. We told ourselves we were the worst thing to happen to the coast since the coalition landed in '08. Imagine. You misunderstand, Detective. We're all answerable to someone. On the contrary, Detective. It's a real drag. Oh, you have? And how did you like Mr. Clare? Oh, come on now. He has his uses. How else would he have stayed in power all these years? Or wait, actually, corruption. That's how he's done it. Fantastic, worm-like corruption. Reaching into the bowels of the earth, of course. He must have his practical uses. How else could he have kept his position all these years? Or wait, actually, he could have kept it with corruption. Fantastic, worm-like corruption. That reaches into the bowels of the earth, of course. And I don't expect you to share anything he told you with me. I'm not a corrupt worm myself. However, if you felt like discussing something, of course. I don't expect you to share anything he told you with me. I'm not a worm myself. But if you felt like passing some information... What? Oh, I am afraid you have misread the situation, Detective. This is not some feudal conflict. It is a negotiation, of course. And I don't expect you to share anything he told you with me. I'm not a corrupt worm myself. However, if you felt like passing some information, well, I can't stop you, can I? Just understand that I don't expect you to share anything he told you with me. I'm not a corrupt worm myself. However, if you felt like passing some information... Of course, Detective. Excuse me for implying otherwise. I don't expect you to share anything he told you with me. I'm not a corrupt verm myself. However, if you felt like passing some information, just... In what way? Of course. Some of them, at least. The ones who work for him. How else would he have stayed in power all these years? No, wait. Actually, of course. How else would he have stayed in power all these years if it were not for ethnic nationalism? Or wait, and here I thought my modest payment of 30 real would stick. And here I thought my modest payment of 100 real would stick. And here I thought my modest payment of 40 real would stick. And here I thought my modest payment of 130 real would stick. Side shifting. Course. That's why my payment of 30 real didn't stick. Side shifting. Of course. That's why my payment of 100 real didn't stick. Side shifting. Of course. That's why my payment of 40 real didn't stick. Side shifting. Of course. That's why my payment of 130 real didn't stick. Of course. You are an honourable man. Way above the money I could offer. So I won't even try, and of course, I will. I've always wanted a side-shifting class knight on my side, sir. Now, of course, I do not expect you to share anything Everard told you with me, not being a corrupt verm myself. However, if you felt like passing some information, how could I stop you? Are we not human? Are we not curious to hear another person's take? It's only natural. We would only be... gossiping. Incredible. Simply incredible. And how is it going? Has this detecting produced a gun? Thank God. And indeed, Mr. Everard as well. In this investigation, one may have use for a firearm. You wouldn't want to get caught with your pants down. Oh. That's so helpful of him. I have a bad feeling about this. Please just say you have it. No loops, darling. Stupendous. I didn't think he'd pull through. Beyond curious. I will choose to interpret that as you turning the alcohol in the strike brew down. For the sake of our professional relationship, and because I don't like the idea of them any more drunk than they already are. What else? Stupendous. Pulling one on the old verm. Commendably done. And did this trick yield anything interesting? I assume it was necessary. For the case? About what, precisely? Don't worry about that article. Regional papers are useless anyway. You probably spared the man his kneecaps, and I can be sure that the local shops have a bone to pick with Everard. That would explain why the Whirling in Rags, where the Union congregates, is the only bar left in Martinez. Well, that and Frit. But Frit has an army of security guards. That would explain why the Whirling in Rags, where the Union congregates, is the only bar left open in Martinez. Well, that and Frit. Because, don't worry about that one article, dear. Regional papers are useless anyway. You probably spared the man his kneecaps, and I can be sure that the local shops have a bone to pick with Everard. Brinkmanship or sabre rattling. Was he surrounded by Union men he wanted to impress? Well, of course he would. That still doesn't mean he's not benefiting from the arrangement. The lorries, the harbour, all of it. Just means he doesn't outright admit to it. Well, of course he would. I really hope you and I get to talk about this drug trade matter in the future. The company has been suspecting foul play for years. Anyway, or he wants you and me to believe he's calm and in control. He's a politician, of course. To other matters you've discussed, perhaps? I'm over-radiated, Harry. I do silly things sometimes, out of pale-related illness. Like take this job. The moral of the story is, I'm over-radiated, Detective. I do silly things sometimes, out of pale-related sickness. Like take this job. The moral of the story is, of course, Detective. You can always drop by later, should something come up. Now, What else can I do for you? And here I thought my modest payment of 70 real would stick. Side shifting. Of course. That's why my payment of 70 real didn't stick. Sir, that's great. For the investigation, I mean. She. I hope she wasn't a serious suspect then. As to the suicide, that must be difficult. Yet, in your line of work, she. I hope she wasn't too serious a suspect. If she got away, naturally. I completely understand. But you mentioned something about Mr. Clare? Or something in conjunction with the union, even. I might have gotten the wrong idea, but I won't pry further about the case. You mentioned something about Mr. Clare, I believe, or something in conjunction with the union? I might have gotten the wrong idea, but, oh, we humans just like to discuss things. It's absolutely normal. I won't pry further. If anything regarding the union has come up, they won't talk to me. Unfortunate. I won't pry further into the details of your investigation, but let me just say, I have full trust in your competence. This thing is what you call a clusterfuck. I'm saddened to hear the news, of course, but we must continue, lest the situation worsens. And you too, Lieutenant. The situation is perilous, but I am sure you're dedicated to avoiding further loss of life. Unlike the Union, who won't even let me talk to them. The company did not send mercenaries after the Union. I told you in great detail about the mistakes my side made. And of course, I accept them completely. I just hope you don't share Everart's view on things. After all, as he said, one's dead now. The Pines certainly hasn't killed any of theirs. Hurry up on that probe. The moment you tell me you're finished at the traffic jam, I will gladly tell you the company's side of the story. It may be the only break we've ever caught as a species. The last one for 400 years. I'll just keep the Corda Leyci in the channel, if that's okay. It's too shallow near the pier. Of course. Jetty. I prefer a good jetty to a pier any day. Jetty? Oh, jetty, oh, jetty. Yes, in Cialinde. It's good to see you here. I only just arrived myself. Hello, Detective. Godspeed, Detective. Maybe there is something else I can assist you with. While you're hot in pursuit? Nothing, really. I've had my eye on this jetty for weeks now, so I decided to investigate it personally. This cluster of buildings isn't on any of the official maps, as far as I can tell. I hear you have singled out a suspect and are in pursuit. This is cause for cautious optimism. I would not want to delay you. It's good to see you here, Detective. I only just arrived myself. It's good to see you here, detectives. I only just arrived myself. I knew you would sympathize. Most Revacholians will never know what this place means. Our home. This island of matter. Or why they were ferried over in the first place. I'm guessing you don't know then. Hello, detectives. How do I like it? Spying has such a negative connotation. I did track your progress along the coast, however, and decided I would be better able to assist you from here. No matter. Lillian and I are getting on much better. For one, she appreciates the concept of rent. Remind me to tell you one day. For now, how can I assist you in this new location? It's pornographically poor. The street has no name, all the men are dead or missing. And is that the carcass of a motor carriage over there? Of course. I hear you have singled out a suspect and are in pursuit. This is cause for cautious optimism. How can I help you at this juncture? It's a pity. Most of these people will never know what this place means, this island of matter. Or why they were ferried over in the first place. Maybe, of course. How fortuitous that I'm so close at hand. What do you need? Oh, I'm not frightened, officer. I'd never... She could easily just... Godspeed, detectives. No need. Lillian and I are getting on much better. For one, she appreciates the concept of rent. Then there's the matter of that little scamp in old lady clothes. She threatened to paint the Corda Leyci red. Like blood, you see. Well, I like it the way it is. White. No, They're in Sealindian, Isola. It's just as well. Lillian and I are getting on much better. For one, she appreciates the concept of rent. Have I told you how they discovered this place? Well, your condition has left you no worse off than most of these people. The literacy rate is around 45% west of the river. 50 years of occupation have left these people in an oblivion of poverty. You're not alone. Neither do most of these people. The literacy rate is around 45% west of the river. 50 years of occupation have left these people in an oblivion of poverty. I'm surprised that woman hasn't put me to the sword yet. Maybe she will. You should ask your questions while you can. Do you know how they discovered this place? That they don't. So am I. And I do know how to use one. Perhaps you shouldn't have. I sort of liked it on her.